Sometimes the most devastating moments in life become the doorway to something extraordinary. What happens when a young woman's military career crumbles in a single afternoon, only for fate to intervene in the most unexpected way? When Sarah Martinez walked through those base gates for what she thought was the last time, humiliated and heartbroken, she had no idea that the sound of rotor blades cutting through the desert air would change everything. This is the true story of how a forced departure became a life-saving rescue, and how the darkest hour can sometimes lead to the brightest dawn. The following is based on true events that occurred at a classified military installation in 2019. Names and some details have been changed to protect the privacy of those involved. The desert sun beat down mercilessly on the concrete walkway as Sarah Martinez carried her duffel bag toward the main gate of Camp Pendleton. Each step felt heavier than the last, not because of the weight she carried, but because of the crushing reality that her military career was over. 3 years of dedicated service, countless nights of training, and dreams of advancement had all come crashing down in a matter of hours. The morning had started like any other. Sarah had risen at 0500 hours, completed her physical training, and reported for duty at the communications center where she worked as a radio operator. She was known for her reliability, her quick thinking under pressure, and her ability to maintain clear communication even during the most chaotic training exercises. Her superiors had often praised her work, and she had been expecting a promotion recommendation any day. But everything changed when Staff Sergeant Williams called her into his office just after lunch. The expression on his weathered face told her immediately that something was seriously wrong. Behind him sat Captain Rodriguez, the base's administrative officer, and a woman in civilian clothes whom Sarah didn't recognize. "Marine Martinez," Captain Rodriguez began, his voice formal and distant. "We need to discuss some serious allegations that have been brought to our attention." She stood at attention, trying to maintain her composure, while her mind raced through any possible mistakes she might have made. Had she missed a protocol? Failed to follow proper communication procedures? The uncertainty was eating at her. The civilian woman opened a thick folder and began reading from what appeared to be an official complaint. "It has been alleged that you have been involved in the unauthorized disclosure of sensitive operational information to individuals outside the military chain of command." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. "Ma'am, I don't understand. I have never disclosed any classified information to anyone. I take my security clearance and my duties very seriously." Captain Rodriguez leaned forward, his expression unchanged. "The allegations are quite specific, Marine Martinez. It's claimed that you shared details about upcoming training exercises with your civilian boyfriend, including timing, locations, and personnel involved." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. She did have a boyfriend, Marcus, whom she had been dating for about 6 months. He was a local college student studying journalism, and while they talked about many things, she was absolutely certain she had never discussed anything related to her work with him. She was trained to compartmentalize her professional and personal life, and she took that responsibility seriously. "Sir, I understand how serious these allegations are, but they are completely false. I have never shared any operational information with Marcus or anyone else outside of proper channels." "May I ask who made these allegations?" The civilian woman, who introduced herself as Agent Thompson from the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, shook her head.
"That information is part of an ongoing investigation."
"What we need from you right now is complete cooperation and honesty." Over the next 2 hours, Sarah was subjected to intense questioning. They asked about every conversation she had ever had with Marcus, every text message, every phone call. They wanted to know about their dates, their discussions, even their arguments. The questioning felt invasive and humiliating, but Sarah answered every question truthfully, maintaining her innocence throughout. Despite her honest responses and her previously spotless record, it became clear that the investigation had already reached its conclusion. Agent Thompson informed her that pending a full investigation, her security clearance was being suspended immediately, and she was being removed from active duty. "But sir," Sarah pleaded with Captain Rodriguez, "my entire career is built on my clearance. Without it, I can't perform my duties." "Isn't there some way to continue working while the investigation proceeds?"
"I'm sorry, Marine Martinez, but the decision has been made. You will be processed out of active duty immediately."
"You have 2 hours to collect your personal belongings and report to the main gate for departure." The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of paperwork, returned equipment, and awkward goodbyes from fellow Marines who had heard the news but didn't know what to say. Some offered words of support, while others seemed to avoid eye contact altogether. The stigma of being under investigation for a security breach was devastating in the tight-knit military community. As she cleaned out her locker, Sarah found herself reflecting on how she had ended up in this situation. She had joined the Marines straight out of high school, driven by a desire to serve her country and prove herself in a challenging environment. Her father, a Vietnam veteran, had been initially skeptical about her decision to enlist, but had ultimately supported her choice. Her mother had worried constantly, but had been proud of her daughter's achievements. The communications field had been a perfect fit for Sarah's skills. She had always been good with technology and had a natural ability to stay calm under pressure. During training exercises, she had often been the voice that coordinated between different units, ensuring that vital information reached the right people at the right time. The responsibility had never felt like a burden. It had felt like a calling. Now, as she folded her uniforms for the last time, she couldn't help but wonder if she had somehow failed without realizing it. Had she said something innocent that had been misinterpreted? Had Marcus somehow overheard a conversation and misunderstood its significance? The questions swirled in her mind, but she had no answers. The walk to the main gate felt like a final march. Marines she passed offered polite nods, but she could see the questions in their eyes. In the military community, word traveled fast, and she knew that by evening, everyone on base would know that Sarah Martinez had been removed under investigation. At the main gate, she presented her temporary departure papers to the guard. He checked them carefully, comparing her identification with the paperwork. After what felt like an eternity, he handed her documents back and opened the gate. "Good luck, Marine," he said quietly, and she could hear the genuine sympathy in his voice. As she stepped outside the base perimeter for what might be the last time, Sarah felt truly alone. She had no family nearby, few civilian friends, and now no military support system. Her apartment was a small place off base that she had rented primarily because it was affordable and close to work. Now it felt like a reminder of everything she had lost. The desert landscape stretched out before her, harsh and unforgiving under the afternoon sun. The nearest bus stop was about a mile away, and she began walking along the dusty road with her duffel bag slung over her shoulder. The weight of her belongings seemed insignificant compared to the weight of her uncertain future. As she walked, Sarah tried to plan her next steps. She would need to call Marcus and explain what had happened, though she dreaded that conversation. She would need to contact her parents and tell them that their daughter's military career was over, under a cloud of suspicion. She would need to find a job, figure out how to pay her bills, and somehow rebuild her life from scratch. The sound of vehicles passing on the nearby highway created a steady background noise, but the road she was walking was relatively quiet. Occasionally, a military vehicle would pass, heading toward the base, and she would feel a pang of loss as she watched it disappear through the gates she had just left behind. About halfway to the bus stop, she heard a sound that made her look up sharply. It was the distinctive whop 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 of helicopter rotor blades, but different from the usual aircraft that operated around the base. This sound was deeper, more powerful, and it was getting closer. She looked up to see a black helicopter approaching from the east, flying low and fast. It wasn't like any aircraft she had seen during the time at Camp Pendleton. As it drew nearer, she could make out the sleek, angular design that marked it as something special, something beyond the standard military aircraft she was accustomed to seeing. The helicopter began to circle her position, and Sarah felt a mixture of curiosity and concern. She was no longer on military property walking on a public road, but the attention from military aircraft felt ominous given her current situation. Had she forgotten to turn in some piece of equipment? Was this somehow related to the investigation? The aircraft made several passes overhead before beginning what was clearly a landing approach. Sarah stopped walking and moved to the side of the road, unsure of what was happening but recognizing that she should stay clear of the landing zone. The helicopter touched down about 50 yards ahead of her, its rotor wash kicking up clouds of dust and debris. Through the swirling sand, she could see figures moving around the aircraft, but the dust made it impossible to identify who they were or what they wanted. As the rotors began to slow and the dust settled, Sarah found herself face to face with a situation she never could have imagined. Standing near the helicopter were several men in military gear, but their uniforms and equipment were different from anything she had encountered during her time with the Marines. One of them, a tall man with weathered features and an air of quiet authority, began walking toward her. His approach was calm and non-threatening, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was going to change everything about her already tumultuous day. The man stopped a respectful distance away and spoke in a clear, steady voice that cut through the remaining helicopter noise. "Sarah Martinez." She nodded, unsure whether she should be relieved or concerned that these people knew her name. "Yes, sir. May I ask who's asking? My name is Commander Sullivan. We need to talk." As she looked at the men surrounding the helicopter, at their professional bearing and specialized equipment, Sarah realized that whatever was happening was far beyond anything she had experienced in her military career. The black helicopter, the unscheduled landing, the commander who somehow knew her name, none of it made sense given what she thought she knew about her situation. But, as Commander Sullivan gestured toward the aircraft, indicating that she should approach, Sarah understood that her day of unexpected developments was far from over. Whatever had brought these men to find her on a dusty road outside Camp Pendleton was about to reveal itself, and somehow she sensed that it would be more significant than even the morning's devastating accusations. The desert wind picked up, carrying the scent of dust and aviation fuel, as Sarah took her first steps toward the helicopter. Behind her lay the ruins of her military career and everything she had worked for. Ahead lay uncertainty, but also the possibility that this unexpected encounter might somehow make sense of the chaos that had engulfed her life. As she approached the aircraft, she noticed the attention to detail in the men's equipment, the professional way they carried themselves, and the obvious quality of their gear. These were not regular military personnel, they were something else entirely. And somehow, they had come looking specifically for her. Commander Sullivan's presence was immediately commanding, yet somehow reassuring, as Sarah approached the helicopter. His uniform bore no standard military insignia that she recognized, but the quality of his gear and the precision of his movements spoke to elite training and extensive experience. The other men near the aircraft maintained a professional perimeter, their attention focused outward while still being aware of the conversation taking place. "Marine Martinez," Commander Sullivan began, "I know this has been an extremely difficult day for you, and I apologize for the unconventional nature of this meeting. However, recent developments have made it necessary for us to speak with you immediately." Sarah shifted her duffel bag to her other shoulder, trying to process this latest unexpected turn. "Sir, I'm not sure I understand. I'm no longer on active duty as of a few hours ago. If this is about the investigation..." "It's precisely about the investigation," he interrupted gently, "but not in the way you think. We have reason to believe that the allegations against you are not only false, but were deliberately fabricated to remove you from your position." The words hit Sarah like a physical shock. After hours of being treated like a criminal, of having her integrity questioned and her career destroyed, hearing someone suggest that she might be innocent felt almost too good to be true. "I don't understand, sir. Who would want to remove me from my position? And why?" Commander Sullivan glanced toward his team, then back at her. "That's a complex question with a complex answer. What I can tell you right now is that your work in communications has brought you to the attention of people who view your skills and your access to information as either a valuable asset or a significant threat."
He paused, studying her face carefully.
"Tell me, in the weeks leading up to today, did you notice anything unusual about your duties? Any changes in the types of communications you were handling? Any new personnel showing interest in your work? Anything that seemed out of the ordinary?" Sarah thought back over the past few weeks, trying to recall anything that might have seemed significant. "There were some changes in our communication protocols about a month ago. We started handling more encrypted traffic, and there were several new exercises involving coordination with other bases. Staff Sergeant Williams mentioned that it was part of enhanced readiness training." "What kind of other bases?" Commander Sullivan's question was sharp, focused. "Different branches mostly. Some Navy communications, some Air Force, and there were a few times when we had to coordinate with units that weren't clearly identified. I assumed there were special operations of some kind, but I never asked for details. That wasn't my place." Commander Sullivan exchanged a look with one of his team members, a woman with short blonde hair who had been monitoring the conversation. She gave a subtle nod, and Sarah caught the exchange even though she wasn't sure what it meant. "Marine Martinez, what I'm about to tell you is going to sound incredible, but I need you to listen carefully and ask questions if something doesn't make sense." He gestured toward the helicopter. "Would you mind if we continued this conversation somewhere more private? I assure you that you're not under arrest or detention, and you're free to leave at any time." Sarah looked at the aircraft, then back at Commander Sullivan. Everything about this situation defied her understanding of how the military worked, but something about the commander's manner convinced her that he was being truthful. "Sir, before I agree to anything, I need to understand who you are and what authority you're operating under." "That's a very reasonable request," he replied with what might have been approval. "I'm the commander in the Naval Special Warfare Development Group. You may have heard it referred to by other names. My team and I are here because your name appeared in intelligence reports related to a security threat that goes far beyond the allegations made against you today." Sarah felt her world shift again. Naval Special Warfare Development Group. She knew enough about military structure to understand that this was an elite unit, the kind that operated at the highest levels of national security. "Sir, I'm just a radio operator. I don't understand how I could be involved in anything that would concern your unit." "That's exactly what makes this situation so dangerous," Commander Sullivan said. "You were targeted specifically because you're just a radio operator, someone with access to sensitive communications but without the kind of high-profile security protection that surrounds more senior personnel." As they talked, Sarah became aware of increased activity around the helicopter. The team members were checking equipment and monitoring the surrounding area with a level of alertness that suggested they expected trouble. One of them approached Commander Sullivan and spoke quietly in his ear. The commander's expression became more serious. "Marine Martinez, we need to move this conversation to a secure location. There are indications that other parties may be taking an interest in your current location." The phrase, "other parties," sent a chill down Sarah's spine. "What kind of other parties?" "The same people who arranged for false allegations to be made against you this morning," he said grimly. "Getting you removed from base was only the first step in their plan." Sarah felt fear beginning to replace confusion. "What kind of plan? What do they want with me?" "Information," Commander Sullivan said simply, "and leverage. Your access to communications protocols, encryption keys, and operational schedules makes you valuable to foreign intelligence services. The false accusations were designed to isolate you, make you vulnerable, and potentially force you into a position where you might be willing to trade information for help clearing your name." The full scope of the situation began to dawn on Sarah. She wasn't just a victim of false accusations. She was apparently a target in some kind of espionage operation. "But I don't have access to anything that sensitive. I follow protocols. I handle routine communications." "You underestimate the value of routine communications to someone trying to piece together operational patterns," the blonde team member interjected, approaching their group. "I'm Lieutenant Chen, intelligence analyst. Even basic scheduling information, personnel movements, and equipment transfers can reveal a great deal about operational capabilities and intentions." Commander Sullivan nodded. "The investigation into your alleged security breach was initiated based on a tip from someone claiming to have witnessed you sharing classified information. We now believe the tip came from someone working for a foreign intelligence service, specifically designed to compromise your position and make you vulnerable to recruitment." Sarah's mind raced as she tried to process this information. "So, Marcus, my boyfriend, is he involved in this?" "We don't believe so," Lieutenant Chen answered. "He appears to have been used as an unwitting cover for the false allegations. The real target was always you and your access to base communication systems." "But I've lost that access now," Sarah pointed out. "My clearance has been suspended and I've been removed from duty." "Exactly," Commander Sullivan said, "which is when they would approach you. Think about it. You're now separated from your support system, facing potential criminal charges, and desperately in need of help to clear your name. If someone approached you offering assistance in exchange for certain information, would you be tempted to listen?" The scenario he painted was disturbingly plausible. In her current state of desperation and isolation, Sarah could imagine being vulnerable to manipulation by anyone who offered hope. So what happens now? How do we prove that the allegations are false? "That's where things get complicated," Commander Sullivan admitted. "The false intelligence was sophisticated enough to fool the initial investigation. Proving your innocence will require exposing the real source of the allegations, which means identifying and potentially confronting foreign intelligence operatives." Lieutenant Chen pulled out a tablet and showed Sarah several photographs. "Do any of these faces look familiar?" "These are individuals we've identified as being involved in intelligence gathering operations in this area over the past several months. Most of the faces were unfamiliar, but one caught her attention. This woman," she said, pointing to a photo of a middle-aged woman with dark hair. "I think I've seen her before. She was at the coffee shop near the base that I go to sometimes. I noticed her because she seemed to be paying a lot of attention to the military personnel who came in." "When was this?" Lieutenant Chen asked, making notes on her tablet. "Several times over the past month. I didn't think much of it at first, but now that I think about it, she always seemed to be there when I was there, and she always had her phone or laptop out like she was working." Commander Sullivan and Lieutenant Chen exchanged another meaningful look. "That's Agent Petrova," Lieutenant Chen said. "Russian intelligence, very experienced in this type of operation." The pieces were starting to fall into place for Sarah. So she was watching me, gathering information about my routine, my relationships, my vulnerabilities? "Most likely," Commander Sullivan confirmed. And when they had enough information, they manufactured the accusations against you to set their recruitment operation in motion. A new thought occurred to Sarah. If you knew about this operation, why didn't you stop it before I lost my career?
Commander Sullivan's expression became uncomfortable.
Because we needed to understand the full scope of their network and their objectives. Sometimes intelligence work requires allowing operations to proceed in order to gather crucial information. The implication of his words stung. So my career was sacrificed as part of your intelligence gathering? Not sacrificed, he said quickly. Temporarily disrupted. Our plan was always to intervene before any permanent damage occurred to your career or your security clearance.
But you were cutting it pretty close,
Sarah said, feeling a mixture of gratitude and resentment. A few more hours and I would have been completely outside military protection. Which is exactly when they would have made their approach, Lieutenant Chen explained. Foreign intelligence services prefer to recruit assets who feel abandoned by their own government. Your emotional state right now, angry, betrayed, desperate, would make you an ideal target for recruitment. Sarah realized that despite the fear and confusion of the situation, she was beginning to feel something she hadn't felt all day. Hope. These people seemed to believe in her innocence, and, more importantly, they seemed to have a plan for proving it. So what comes next? She asked. How do we expose this operation and clear my name? Commander Sullivan checked his watch and glanced towards his team members, who were clearly ready to move. That depends partly on you. What we're proposing is not without risk, and it's definitely not standard procedure. We need you to help us identify other members of this intelligence network by appearing to be vulnerable to recruitment. The suggestion sent another chill through Sarah. You want me to pretend to be interested in working with foreign agents?
In a controlled environment with full protection and support, Lieutenant Chen clarified.
We would never put you in actual danger, but we need to draw out the other members of their network so we can neutralize the entire operation. Sarah looked at the faces around her, professional, competent people, who seemed genuinely committed to protecting her and resolving this situation. Then she thought about the alternative, living under the shadow of false accusations, trying to rebuild her life while the real threats remained active and potentially targeting other service members. What exactly would I have to do? Commander Sullivan smiled for the first time since their conversation began. First, we get you somewhere safe where we can plan properly. Then we turn the tables on the people who tried to destroy your career. As Sarah approached the helicopter with Commander Sullivan and his team, she felt like she was crossing a threshold into a world she had never imagined. Hours earlier, she had been a routine communications operator, facing the end of her military career. Now she was apparently a key figure in an international espionage operation, working with some of the military's most elite personnel to expose foreign intelligence threats. The helicopter's engines began to spin up as the team prepared for departure. Through the aircraft's windows, Sarah could see sophisticated communications equipment and other gear that spoke to the high-tech nature of their operations. Whatever came next, she knew it would be unlike anything she had experienced in her relatively routine military service. As the aircraft lifted off, carrying her away from the road where her military career had seemingly ended, Sarah realized that this unexpected encounter might not just restore her career, it might transform it entirely. The question now was whether she had the courage and capability to see this mission through to its conclusion. The helicopter touched down at what appeared to be a private airfield about 30 miles inland from Camp Pendleton. As Sarah stepped out of the aircraft, she found herself looking at a facility unlike anything in her previous military experience. The buildings were modern, low-profile structures that seemed designed to blend into the desert landscape. There were no visible signs or markings to indicate what organization operated the facility. Commander Sullivan led her toward the main building, flanked by Lieutenant Chen and two other team members whose names she still hadn't learned. The interior was equally impressive, modern technology seamlessly integrated with military efficiency. Workstations lined the walls, displaying multiple monitors showing what appeared to be surveillance feeds, communication intercepts, and data analysis screens. Welcome to Forward Operating Base Sierra, Commander Sullivan said as they walked through the main operations center. This is where we coordinate intelligence operations for the Western United States. What you see here is classified at the highest levels. N. Another end of death. From Bartholomew. Pop thought I'd been taking notice. Whatever is it, Contest 1. Personnel moved efficiently between workstations, managing what was clearly a complex ongoing mission. How many facilities like this are there? That's not something I can discuss, he replied with a slight smile. But I can tell you that the threat we're dealing with is significant enough to justify substantial resources. They entered a smaller conference room where Lieutenant Chen activated a large wall display. Maps, photographs, and data charts filled the screen, showing what appeared to be a comprehensive intelligence picture of the operation that had targeted Sarah. "Let me show you what we know," Lieutenant Chen began, manipulating the display to highlight different elements. "The operation against you is part of a larger intelligence campaign targeting military communications personnel across multiple bases on the West Coast. Over the past 6 months, we've identified at least 12 service members who have been approached, investigated, or compromised through similar tactics." Sarah studied the display, seeing photographs of other military personnel alongside timelines and incident reports. Were any of them actually recruited? "Two that we know of," Commander Sullivan answered grimly. "Both are now in custody, but the damage they caused before we identified them was significant. Communications protocols had to be changed, operations delayed, and security procedures completely overhauled." The weight of the situation became clearer to Sarah. This wasn't just about her individual case. It was about protecting military communications integrity across multiple installations. "So stopping this network is a matter of national security." "Exactly," Lieutenant Chen confirmed. "And you're in a unique position to help us do that. The foreign operatives invested substantial time and effort in targeting you specifically. They're not going to abandon that investment easily." Commander Sullivan activated another part of the display, showing surveillance photos from various locations around Camp Pendleton and the surrounding area. "Since your departure from base this afternoon, we've identified at least 3 different surveillance teams monitoring potential contact points. They're clearly preparing to make their recruitment approach." One of the photos showed the coffee shop Sarah had mentioned, with several individuals who appeared to be conducting surveillance from different vantage points. Another showed the area near her apartment with similar suspicious activity. "They're really watching all those places?" Sarah asked, feeling a chill as she realized how thoroughly her life had been studied and catalogued. "Intelligence operations of this type require extensive preparation," Lieutenant Chen explained. "They need to understand your habits, your vulnerabilities, your potential value, and your likely responses to different approaches. The more they know about you, the more likely their recruitment attempt will succeed." Commander Sullivan moved to another section of the display. "Which brings us to our proposed operation. We want to give them exactly what they're looking for. A desperate, isolated former Marine who feels betrayed by her own military and might be open to alternative forms of employment." The plan he outlined was both sophisticated and dangerous. Sarah would return to her normal routine, making herself available for contact while being monitored and protected by the Special Operations Team. When the foreign agents made their approach, she would appear to be interested while gathering intelligence about their network, capabilities, and objectives. "The key," Lieutenant Chen emphasized, "is that you need to appear genuinely interested without actually providing any real information or compromising any ongoing operations. It's a delicate balance that requires careful preparation and constant communication with our support team." Sarah felt overwhelmed by the complexity of what they were asking her to do. "I don't have any training in this kind of work. I'm a communications operator, not a spy." "That's actually one of your advantages," Commander Sullivan said. "Trained intelligence operatives often display subtle behavioral patterns that experienced foreign agents can detect. Your natural reactions and genuine emotions will make you much more credible." He activated a new section of the display showing detailed profiles of the suspected foreign operatives. "We've identified the likely approach team. Agent Petrova, whom you recognized from the coffee shop, will probably serve as the primary contact. She typically poses as a freelance journalist or researcher, someone who might legitimately be interested in speaking with former military personnel." Sarah studied Petrova's photograph and background information. The woman had an extensive history of intelligence operations across multiple countries with a particular specialty in recruiting military communications personnel. "How do you know so much about her?" "She's been operating in this area for almost a year," Lieutenant Chen answered. "We've been tracking her activities as part of a broader counterintelligence operation. Your case represents our best opportunity to gather detailed intelligence about her network and neutralize the entire operation." The next several hours were spent in intensive briefing and preparation. Sarah learned about surveillance techniques, communication methods, and the subtle signs that would indicate she was being approached by foreign agents. She practiced responses to various scenarios, learned how to appear interested while avoiding actual commitment, and memorized contact procedures for emergency situations. The technical team outfitted her with sophisticated but nearly undetectable monitoring equipment. A small device disguised as a fitness tracker would maintain constant communication with the support team, while another device built into her phone would record conversations and transmit location data. Remember, Commander Sullivan emphasized during the final briefing, your safety is our primary concern. If at any point you feel threatened, or if the situation becomes dangerous, abort the mission immediately.
We have teams positioned at multiple locations who can reach you within minutes.
As evening approached, it was time for Sarah to return to her apartment and begin the operation. The plan was for her to resume her normal routine while remaining alert for contact from the foreign operatives. Based on their surveillance patterns, the team expected an approach within 24 to 48 hours. The drive back to her apartment felt surreal. After the events of the day, losing her military career, being recruited for a counterintelligence operation, learning about international espionage networks, returning to her modest off-base housing felt like stepping back into a previous life. Her apartment looked exactly as she had left it that morning, but everything felt different now. She knew that surveillance teams were watching the building, that her phone calls might be monitored, and that at any moment she might receive contact from foreign intelligence operatives. The ordinary space had been transformed into a stage for an intelligence operation. That evening, Sarah followed the team's instructions by engaging in normal activities while remaining alert for unusual contact. She went to the grocery store, stopped by the coffee shop, where she had noticed Agent Petrova, and spent time at her apartment as if trying to process the day's events and plan her future. The coffee shop visit felt particularly tense. Sarah ordered her usual drink and found a table where she could observe the other customers while appearing to work on her laptop. Several people looked familiar from her previous visits, but she couldn't be sure if any of them were surveillance operatives or potential contacts. After about an hour, she noticed a woman at a nearby table who kept glancing in her direction. It wasn't Agent Petrova, but someone younger with auburn hair who appeared to be working on a tablet. When Sarah left the coffee shop, she noticed the woman remained behind, but felt like she was being watched as she walked to her car. The next day brought the contact they had been expecting. Sarah was shopping for groceries when a woman approached her in the produce section. It was Agent Petrova, but she looked different than in the surveillance photos. More casual, more approachable. "Excuse me," Petrova said with a slight accent, "but aren't you Sarah Martinez? I think we may have met at the coffee shop near the base." Sarah's pulse quickened, but she tried to appear naturally surprised rather than alarmed. "I'm sorry, I don't think we've actually met. Though I do go to that coffee shop pretty regularly." "I'm Maria Petrov," the woman said, extending her hand. "I'm a freelance journalist working on a series of articles about military personnel transitioning to civilian life. I was hoping I might be able to speak with you about your experiences." The approach was exactly as Commander Sullivan's team had predicted. Sarah forced herself to appear hesitant but potentially interested. "I'm not sure I'd be comfortable talking to a journalist right now. I've had some difficult experiences recently." "I completely understand," Petrova said sympathetically. "I've heard that the transition can be particularly challenging when it's not entirely voluntary. Perhaps we could just have coffee sometime, off the record? I'd be happy to share some resources that might be helpful." Sarah pretended to consider the offer while her heart raced. This was the moment the entire operation had been building toward. "I suppose coffee wouldn't hurt. Though I have to ask, how did you know about my situation?" Petrova's expression showed what appeared to be genuine concern. "Word travels in small military communities. I've been researching stories about service members who've faced unfair treatment or false accusations. Your case caught my attention because it seems so unjust." They agreed to meet the following afternoon at a different coffee shop, one that the surveillance team had already prepared with monitoring equipment. As Sarah completed her shopping and returned to her apartment, she knew that the real test of the operation was about to begin. The next day's meeting with Petrova went exactly as the intelligence team had briefed. The foreign agent began by expressing sympathy for Sarah's situation, gradually moving to subtle questions about her military experience, her knowledge of base operations, and her feelings about the way she had been treated. Sarah followed her training, appearing to be emotionally vulnerable while avoiding specific details about military operations. She expressed frustration with the military justice system, concern about her financial future, and uncertainty about her career prospects. "It's so unfair," Petrova said, leaning forward with apparent empathy. "People with your skills and experience should have opportunities, regardless of what some misguided investigation concluded. Have you given any thought to consulting work? There are organizations that value military communications expertise." This was the recruitment pitch the team had been waiting for. Sarah expressed cautious interest while avoiding any actual commitment. "What kind of organizations? I'm not sure what options are available to someone in my situation. There are international consulting firms, research organizations, even some government contractors who might be interested in your background. Would you be open to meeting with some contacts of mine? Completely informal, just to explore what might be possible. Sarah agreed to consider it, and they arranged another meeting for later in the week. As she left the coffee shop, she knew that the operation was progressing according to plan, but she also felt the weight of responsibility for its success. Over the following days, the meetings with Petrova became more specific. The agent introduced her to other members of the network, each presenting themselves as legitimate business contacts or researchers. Through careful questioning and observation, Sarah was able to help the surveillance team identify key players in the espionage network and understand their operational methods. The breakthrough came during the fourth meeting, when one of Petrova's contacts made a more explicit offer. He claimed to represent an international consulting firm that needed someone with Sarah's background to help analyze military communications protocols for defensive purposes. The man, who called himself Dr. Volkov, was more direct than the others had been. "We understand that your former employers may have treated you unfairly, but your expertise remains valuable. We're prepared to offer significant compensation for consulting work that would help protect allied nations against communication threats." Sarah expressed interest while asking for time to consider the offer. That evening, she met with Commander Sullivan's team to plan the final phase of the operation. "You've done excellent work," Commander Sullivan told her. "We now have enough evidence to arrest the entire network and roll up their operation. But we'd like to go one step further." The final phase involved Sarah agreeing to provide sample information to demonstrate her access and knowledge. The intelligence team prepared carefully crafted false information that would appear valuable while actually serving to trap the foreign operatives. When Sarah delivered the false information to Dr. Volkov, the transaction was recorded by multiple surveillance teams. Within hours, the entire espionage network was under arrest, and Sarah's role in the operation was complete. 6 months later, Sarah Martinez stood in dress uniform as she was promoted to Staff Sergeant and awarded the Defense Intelligence Service Medal for her role in neutralizing a significant foreign intelligence threat. Her security clearance had been fully restored, and she had been selected for advanced training in counterintelligence operations. The false accusations that had nearly destroyed her career had instead become the catalyst for uncovering her true calling and capabilities. The black helicopter that had seemed so ominous on that dusty road outside Camp Pendleton had actually been the beginning of a new chapter in her military service, one that would take her far beyond anything she had originally imagined possible.